So to start, let me give a brief introduction on the topic. So the prevalence of hypertension in non-Hispanic Black men surpasses all other racial groups. However, the mechanisms by which Black men have a higher incidence of hypertension remain unclear. We know that the sympathetic nervous system contributes to the regulation of blood pressure. Our laboratory has a focus on the sympathetic nervous system, and we recently found that spontaneous bursts of sympathetic nerve activity at rest cause greater pressor and vasoconstrictor responses in young, healthy Black men when compared to white men, which we will refer to as sympathetic vascular transduction. However, in this work, we did not take into consideration family history of hypertension. Since a family history of hypertension further compounds cardiovascular risk, our purpose of the current study is to explore the influence of a family history of hypertension on racial differences in sympathetic vascular transduction. So first, I want to go over the experimental setup for the study. These preliminary experiments consisted of 22 men total. There were 9 men who had a family history of hypertension, 4 of whom were Black. There were 13 men lacking a family history of hypertension, 6 of whom were Black. A family history of hypertension was defined as having a parent with a medical diagnosis of high blood pressure. So next, I will show you the measures we used, which were all continuously recorded during a 20-minute resting period. So we measured femoral arterial blood flow using a duplex Doppler ultrasound, heart rate using an electrocardiogram, beat-to-beat arterial blood pressure using a phenometer, and muscle sympathetic nerve activity using microneurography. Since MSNA, which is muscle sympathetic nerve activity, is our primary measurement, let me explain how it works. So briefly, a microelectrode is guided into the sympathetic fascicles of the peroneal nerve. This results in a direct recording of sympathetic outflow directed towards the skeletal muscle vasculature, as seen here. Each of these spikes is a burst of MSNA. We were able to get a continuous outflow of sympathetic nerve activity, and we use this to assess sympathetic vascular transduction. I will show you how we do this on the next slide. So here's our MSNA recording, and here is the continuous arterial blood pressure. Now we use signal averaging to track these bursts, and this is what sympathetic vascular transduction is. It's tracking each burst of MSNA to see how it will affect blood pressure. So examining this next graph, we see that the x-axis represents the subsequent 10 cardiac cycles following the burst of MSNA, which again is muscle sympathetic nerve activity, which occurs at cardiac cycle 0, while the y-axis represents the change in mean arterial pressure. What this looks like is that each of these dotted lines here represents an individual burst of MSNA, while this solid line represents the mean of all the bursts of MSNA. So now let's see what this looks like in terms of our comparison for family history of hypertension. So as a similar setup to the last slide, here's our data for the change of blood pressure on the y-axis, following the MSNA burst on the x-axis. So first, these red triangles represent Black men with a family history of hypertension. These red circles represent Black men lacking a family history of hypertension. These blue triangles represent white men with a family history of hypertension, and these blue circles represent white men lacking a family history of hypertension. So as you can see, the Black men have a greater pressor response when compared to the white men. However, family history of hypertension does not appear to influence mean arterial pressure. So here's our data for leg vascular conductance, which was calculated from our Doppler ultrasound measures of femoral blood flow and blood pressure to provide an index for vasoconstriction. So the graph is set up in a similar manner to the last graph with the 4 groups. However, on the y-axis, it's the percent change in leg vascular conductance. And so as you can see, all 4 groups have an expected reduction in leg vascular conductance, which is again vasoconstriction in the leg. However, a presence of family history of hypertension does not appear to influence leg vascular conductance. So in summary, these preliminary findings do not support a role for a presence of a family history of hypertension and augmenting sympathetic vascular transduction. So the augmented sympathetic vascular transduction reported in Black men appear to be independent of family history of hypertension. So thank you so much for your time, and I would love to take your questions now.